Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing today? You guys enjoying the festival? Yeah? All right, so show of hands, how many people have heard of Hueforge? Well, that's a lot of people.
Good,
Okay,
they came to the right place.
It's popular. So, how many of you have used Hueforge? Okay. How many of you have been confused by Hueforge? Sounds about right. So my name is Danny. I do tutorials on Hueforge over on YouTube. I primarily do beginner tutorials to help all of you guys out in learning the software. This is Steve. Steve is a solo developer of Hueforge. Can I get a round of applause for him? So I'm going to translate for him for the beginners here. We have a lot of new things that have come out recently. This time last year, we came out with a new mode in color match. That was a more accurate way for you to recreate your 2D images and turn them into 3D prints. We were now able to just match your image. That's why it's called color match. So match the colors between your image and the print. So now we have more modes that have come out that make it a little bit more complicated. We've also come out with more plugins that do not necessarily fit the theme of Hueforge, which is you can print it on any 3D printer that supports pauses. Now we have some plugins that require an AMS or an MMU or a tool changer. They're a little bit more complicated, but you get more capability and more accuracy. So yeah, so we're gonna go over what Hueforge is at its base level for the people that may not know what Hueforge is and what it does, and then we will go into what has come out recently in the last, 2 weeks?
Well, I mean, the work of the last couple months, but yeah, last 2 weeks have been the release.
Yeah. So Hueforge is a software that is developed to literally turn a 2D image into a 3D mesh. And then you're able to add your own filaments and blend colors together, similar to painting. We call it filament painting because I want you to think if you have a very opaque blue filament and then you stack a very transparent red filament on top of that, it's going to look purple when you print it. So that's where filament painting comes from. So we are literally just bringing in our images, and in our standard mode, in our most basic mode, Hueforge will look at your image and it will look at it with the darkest parts in mind and the brightest parts, and it creates the mesh from the darkest to the lightest areas. But it's doing all of the work for you. So in color match, which is the new mode that we came out with, that's a more manual mode. It's a more expert style mode. It's not something that we typically recommend people to dive straight into because you need to know how filaments will blend, how your filaments at home will blend. And you need to understand the process of filament painting in general. But you are able to physically tell Hueforge where colors are in the image and then stack those accordingly. And you can get really complicated and really, really accurate results with your filament at home. So it's a very cool mode. Is there anything else that?
I would say if you haven't come by the booth, we have tons of examples of all the modes. And then also, I just released on the website right before this release an About Hueforge button that goes into more basic detail about what Hueforge does and covers the 4 major usage modes. Combo, which is standard, color pop, color aware, and color match, which gives you a little bit more of a good description of how they work and how they look at the image. So I am trying to put out more documentation and help for beginners. I actually also have documentation coming out very soon for how to make your first Hueforge and how to print your first Hueforge. Common things that catch people right away at the beginning when they first start.
So are there any questions so far? Any questions? No? No questions? Sweet, I'm doing my job well.
You're doing your job, translator.
Wow.
All right,
Okay.
and I'm doing my job sitting down because it's a long show. Okay, so let's start with what's new. And now it's not working. I literally tested it and it was fine, and now it doesn't work. It goes, right? Hold on. I guess I'm standing up. Maybe it just didn't. Oh, there you go. Now it's working. Okay, now maybe I'm too far away. Okay, so Spot Fix is the first real new thing in Hueforge that isn't a plugin. A lot of times when you're color matching and sometimes when you're color popping, you'll end up with an area that is like often black or white that is much lower or higher than the area around it. And that's because when you have 2 black areas or very dark areas, they'll get confused which layer to be on. It's hard to tell whether it's slightly red or if it's just black. Hueforge struggles with that. So you can get these areas that refuse to go where they belong. Oftentimes also like highlights, you have a highlight on something shiny and you have a bunch of highlights on different colors that are shiny and they have one spike in the middle poking up way high that you don't want it to be there. So spot fix helps to solve this issue. I think the issue is it just can't see my pointer. It's like IR. Come on. There we go. I call, being a little humorous, these around the eyes here are what I call kind of the pit of despair because you get the sides of the layers around them from the previous lower layers, and you're like, these are supposed to be, I just want them up here with the rest of my red, and they're not there. And so the question is how to get rid of them. And spot fix is one way to do it. I think I just need to be over here. There you go. Or maybe it's just slow. No, that went back. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. So it's its own mode. It was too confusing when I tried to like make it just a workflow you could always use. It was too confusing. So there's a button at the top left of the preview window now that says spot fix, and I'll show you in a moment. You turn it on, and then you're in spot fix mode. And that means that it has its own undo history and things like that, so you don't have to worry about polluting the rest of your undo history with spot fixes, or if you go back and undo, you accidentally undo a spot fix. You can't undo it if you're not in spot fix mode. And when you choose spot fix, then all of a sudden when you're moving over the preview pane, you start getting region highlights that show you what is currently selected under the cursor. And you can increase how many layers are selected by the W and S keys. W increases the number of layers above the current layer. So you're pointing at a layer. When you're pointing in the preview, you're pointing at a layer, a height. And increasing the W value says, also give me the next layer up and the layer up above that. Because oftentimes these are pits, but they might have a few colors or a few layers in there. So you can go up, and then S goes down in the layer to 0. And then you can also hold Shift, and that'll let you go up and down for the layers below. So more layers below or more layers or fewer layers below. It's pretty easy when you do it. And then you click. And when you click, it makes a spot fix group, and that'll highlight in blue. And if you're like, crap, I didn't get everything I wanted, I missed a little bit, you can control click in another area and add that to your loop. But the most, in the current version, and this is something that I changed, there's a 0.1 fix came out. One of the things I changed is that regions are exclusive. I was having some people who didn't realize that two regions were overlapping the same area, and then you were getting holes through your print rather than adjustments. So now they're exclusive. They can't, if it's been selected, it can't be selected again. It will, and then delete or backspace will remove the current area that you've currently highlighted. So if you want to get rid of one, you can hit delete or backspace. It'll remove it from the list and stop spot fixing. They're pretty good around resizing, but they aren't perfect. If you go real small, or big doesn't matter as much. If you go real small, they can start jumping areas, and you may have to remake them if you decide to shrink a lot from where you first did them. But they are pretty good. Like if you're saying, oh, it was 200 and I want to go to 240, they're going to be just the same. Because it literally just reselects that area again with the same settings. Let me see if it's just slow. So here's an example of a spot being selected. Those have been selected with the tool. This loop here is these here. Well, this spot fix line here that's highlighted is these blue highlights here. So I picked those and they're highlighted. And then what you do is you just either hit the plus button on your keyboard or you start hitting plus or minus depending on which way you want to go. In this case, they're down here. You can't really see it, but they're way down at the bottom, and I need to bring them up here. So I'm going to hit plus a bunch of times to bring them up to there. I had a button where you could say, like, just click on the layer and have it go there, and it caused me all kinds of problems I haven't debugged yet. So I said, let's get this out, and we'll fix that later. But here, I'm going to change 25 layers up to the black at layer 36. Now I chose to go to this black, or the black right here, rather than the lower ones, just to make sure it's saturated, because this white can bleed up a little bit, so to make sure it's super black. And then when we do that, then there's no more pits, which is really nice. And it's saved in your project, and it will continue from your project. Your project will have those pits. Okay, so then we could grab more areas of this image. Like if you could have grabbed the areas down here as well. But you're going to be limited by the top layer, so the highest layer. So if you try to keep moving them all up, and one of them is significantly higher, it's going to stop you from continuing. It doesn't flatten them out, it's just going to stop you from moving them. You can choose to flatten them first and then move them, to flatten to the bottom and then move them up. That would be a solution for that. But in general, getting like a couple of small areas in an area and just doing a few spot fixes is a better way to go than try to grab everything at once. Okay, now spot fix is meant for relatively small spots. It's not really meant to fix this whole thing here. You could do it. If you were very, very determined, you could do it this way. You could also go the other way. This one here, the red, you'd want to lower it down into the gray, blue, to be a little bit better. This is from the tolerance of color pop. Anyone familiar with color pop mode? Just a couple? Okay. In color pop, it separates the image to grayscale and color. But this is one of the modes where when you have a tolerance slider that says this much is grayscale and this much is color, and getting that line so that the blacks are in the right place is very, very hard. And also so because this is a blue. Anyway, it's picking that wrong, this picking these wrong from our perspective. From its perspective, it's saying, I did it right. I did what you told me to do. So this is a lot. And you could do it, but it would take a while and be fiddly. So that's part of the reason why I introduced Color Drop, which is a plugin. It's a new plugin that's out. Let me come over here. So the Color Drop plugin, which is a paid plugin, $15 one time. It'll go to $20 when it's been after a couple months. It lets you say, look, I use this black twice. I use the same black at 36 and at 25. Why do I need to stack them all the way up on top of each other? Well, why? Because Hueforge is layer by layer. As he said, it's always, every printer can do it. And the plugins are one way where we can get around it if you have the capability to print multiple swaps per layer. So what it says is, why stack this all up here? Why not bring all the reds down and stack them on top of the black at the bottom? And so now I have two paths. It splits the model, and I have two paths stacked together all into one model file. Well, multiple STL files that you load together as an assembly. And then it prints right on top of the bottom black. So now all the blacks are unified. They're all on the same layer. It's all that same black at the bottom. The print is shorter. There's no edges and ridges. It takes less time to print because it turns out that even if I'm swapping more often, layers take way longer than print swaps. Unless you get really high numbers of print swaps, layers are more expensive. It's going to take tens of minutes, if not 30 minutes to print a layer. It's going to take a minute, even on an AMS, to swap. So that was not actually something I intended when I did this. I thought it was going to take longer, but it actually takes less time and less filament. So here's a demo of how it works. So we have our layers here and our layers down here, and we basically take this section, we cut a hole in the mesh below it that's the same shape as this black layer, and we get rid of that black layer and we drop the filaments that were above it onto the base layer. So geometrically, we basically chop the top off, cut a hole, and drop everything down, and you don't have to assemble this afterwards. You bring all the STLs together into your slicer, you color them by object, and you just print them all at once, and they're all together. Maybe you could reassemble them afterwards if you don't have a multi-material unit, but I wouldn't probably try. I don't think it would look quite the same. But please feel free to experiment. Prove me wrong. So the Color Drop plugin, this is the window. It's the drop window. This is showing how they're stacked. It's hard to see here, but this is a black layer here, and it's showing how it's been stacked. It will automatically try to do it. And if we're doing it with white and black, it's generally pretty good. You can get it wrong. Then you can reset it, and then it'll stack it all back up. And then right now, the way the UI is, I need to go from top to bottom. Grab the first black you want to nest and nest it. Grab the second black you want to nest, or whatever color. It doesn't have to be black. It just often is. Don't try to do the bottom one over. You'll find you can't move anything from this top column. I'm going to work on that, but it's not too bad, and it normally does the auto pretty well. You'll notice this looks a little better than if you've ever used Hueforge. Does anyone here use Hueforge? Okay, got a couple. Hueforge doesn't blend your filaments in here. It's just slicer view. They're all solid colors. This one does. It's a new style of plugin that can do the blending. And so you get a fully blended final view. This is what the preview window in Hueforge would show if it were stacked like this. It all happens very quickly, and then you save out your projects, and it tells you down here the overall height was 2.2 millimeters. Now it's 1.36 millimeters, and we cut 0.84 millimeters off. And if you don't think at 0.04 or 0.08 layers, that's saving time, it is. And then I just have a zoom in of the fixed tail, so you can see the tail's all fixed. And then here's some performance results for the Spaceman model, different modes. This is the standard ColorPop Spaceman. It took about 3 hours. The color drop one took about 1 hour 51. And it went from 26 grams of filament to 16 grams of filament total. And the waste was basically the same, and the swaps happened to be the same on that model, but that's not true on all models. It will go up. FlatForge, because ColorDrop works with FlatForge. FlatForge took 7 hours and 21 minutes, and 47 grams with 48 changes, and 4 grams of waste. ColorDrop FlatForge took 3 hours and 51 minutes, 28 changes, 32 grams total, and 2.1 grams of waste, so half the waste. So for FlatForge, this is great. Now, again, this will only work in images where you're using the same color multiple times in the color core. Not the mesh core doesn't matter, for those of you who know what the mesh core is. So it only works for certain types. Color pop, color aware are great ones, and then if you build your color match correctly for this, it's very different from how I normally build them, then it'll work great for those too. But for standard mode, it's generally not going to work very well. You're not going to get many savings in standard mode because you don't use black or white twice. You can do this for lithophanes too. If you're inverting, it can match on whites, and it can show the backlit. If you're in backlit when you enter, it will show you the backlit rendering, and it will match, basically look for whites more than blacks to do your stacking.
Steve,
Yes.
is that using standard purge volumes then on all your DMMUs, or are you adjusting purge volume as well to get different like purge weights?
I have not changed purge volumes from anything I use normally.
Like the standard bamboo?
The standard bamboo, yeah, like 0.33, kind of calculate based on the item. I will say for color drop, less important for color drop, but for FlatForge, for certain, using a purge tower is actually recommended.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you're having much smaller, thinner layers and tiny issues. You want to make sure it's fully primed. I use it for color drop too when I have room. If I don't have room, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'll just keep printing. But if I do have room on the bed, I'll add it just to make sure it's all great, because you will have some small bits of color that you want to make sure are well set. But I didn't do any real, my first color drop I did on a tool changer. So I said, oh great, it saved time, great. But I'm sure it'll be worse on my X1s. And I put it on my X1, I'm like, it still saves time. What? And then I did the actual math and printed all those. Of course, half of our spacemen have gone walking, but we have a couple of these spaceman models there you can look at. Anything that Danny needs to translate for you? Questions?
Do you guys understand everything he just said? I mean, oh, hey, we got a thumbs up in the back, man. All right, so look, we'll bring it down.
You replaced Danny.
Yeah. So first of all, FlatForge, because I saw that basically nobody raised their hand. I mean, I saw a couple people, but FlatForge. Typically, Hueforge is printed from a base layer and printed up, and you can feel the texture. If you come over to the booth, you can feel all those Hueforges. Most of them are like that. You can feel the texture, and it looks like an oil painting. Whereas FlatForge, a lot of people were requesting to print them face down.
They wanted the texture on the plate.
They wanted the cool, the really rainbow, cool textured plates that you can print with. You can print a Hueforge face down, and you'll get that kind of effect onto your Hueforge. There are other reasons to want to use FlatForge, but that is the main reason. Also, you haven't touched on Hugeforge that came out.
Correct.
Hugeforge is a free plugin. Most of these plugins are paid, but Hugeforge is not. So typically, if you wanted to print a giant Hueforge, but you don't have like an Orange Storm Giga, you have a small bamboo, well I say small, but an X1C or something like that, and you want to print a giant project, you would have to make the giant STL in Hueforge, bring it into your slicer, chop it up in a way that makes sense, and it was just a pretty big hassle. So instead of doing that, now there's the plugin Hugeforge, which will do that for you. You can tell it how big your build plate is, and then it will cut it up into segments, and it will tell you how to set them up, how to put them together. That's how we did the Spaceman that is 6 foot tall at our booth, using the Hugeforge plugin.
And that's actually a color dropped Hugeforge, because all the plugins interact with each other. You can FlatForge and you can color drop a Hugeforge as well.
So Spot Fix, whenever you're doing a more advanced technique using color pop or color match like Hugh was describing, there are definitely pits and there are definitely spikes. This at least helps the pits. It just
It
is
helps
very.
the spikes too. You can negate them.
Okay.
Oh, not the tiny spikes.
Yeah, like the tiny
little
ones
teeny
along the
spikes. You need to
edges.
use the spike removal.
But having that spot fix, because it's kind of disorienting when you, like, he showed the example of the parrot where the two nostrils, I guess we could call it nostrils.
They were just part of the feathers above the nostrils. Really.
Oh, sure. So
Yeah,
they
they
were
weren't
just
supposed
weird.
to be nostrils.
Right.
They were accidental nostrils.
But it just looks weird. It doesn't look like how we expect it to as humans, but that's how Hueforge perceived it. So that's where spot fix really comes into play, and you can help with those really tiny areas and just fine tuning your projects.
Yeah, you can spend less time, if you're in color match, you can spend less time dragging near blacks to the core to try to get them to match correctly. You can just say, okay, that area is close enough, I'll just fix it with, a couple of spot fixes here rather than trying to go back and forth. Yep.
So could you explain again the difference between the color match and the color pop?
Okay, so, yeah.
It's not very interesting.
Okay, so color pop, and this is actually something we have descriptions of these specifically on the website now, which I think will be good with pictures, so that's helpful, but it's a good question. So color pop looks at an image and says, I'm going to separate it into the areas that are colorful and the areas that are not. So grayscale or near grayscale, and there's a tolerance slider to pick how much you think is gray and how much is not. So if you've pre-processed it and you've literally done a Photoshop filter to make like a rose red and everything else grayscale, that tolerance can be at 1. It's going to get all the grayscale and your rose is going to be separate. But it's not color, it's colors, it's all the colors. So if you have red, green, blue, orange, purple, they're all going to be within, when it splits it into 2 standard luminance ranges. So all of your color is in a luminance range now, and all your grayscale is in a luminance range, but there's no separation of colors inside of there. So if you have a green and a red, they're often the same luminance value, and they're going to be on the same layer, and you're still not going to be able to split them up. So color pop is for like very small, like one color family. You got fire colors, you've got blue greens, you've got stuff that blends nicely and has good range. It's super easy to split those up. Color match, you are saying, I know I have these colors in the image, and I'm going to stack them up in an order that makes sense to me and is appealing to me, and that makes sense for the way that filaments blend together. And so I'm going to go from like a white to a blue to a black to have the sky, and then I'm going to go from the sky to like the grass, and then the flowers at the top, and they're all going to be stacked in order. And then Hueforge is going to literally look at each layer on your mesh core and say, what color is what pixel of this image, or actually it's going to look at every pixel in the image and say which layer on the mesh core matches the best. And whichever one matches the best, it's going to say, okay, make the mesh that tall, so it'll be that color. So it's way more control, but way more work. Whereas, Hueforge is splitting them up for you in color pop, but much more limited. Does that help?
Yeah.
Do you need the translator or?
No, I got it.
Okay. I'm
He
here.
just really wants to work here.
I
He's
do
not
work
going to be
here.
able to translate this last feature because it doesn't make sense to him.
No, it doesn't. I don't understand why we have it, but hey, I'm
So,
not the only user.
any other questions before I move on to the project tree? Again, the color drop's the only plugin here. The spot fix and project tree are both included in Hueforge. They're part of the core product because everything that makes sense as the core product goes in the core product. The only reason Hueforge got pulled out is just so I can change it and edit it and fix it. But it's just a quality of life improvement on Hueforge. That's why it's free. And I can if I need to bug fix Hueforge separately from Hueforge, I can do that rather than having to do a whole new release. So that was part of why I split that out. Project tree. One thing a lot of people have asked for is, hey, I got it in color pop, but I'm not sure if maybe I could do a better color match. So is there a way for me to take a snapshot and then come back to it if I don't like what I did? And the answer was like, save a project, start modifying it, and save another name, and hope you don't overwrite the old one, because then you're hosed. So project tree is the answer to that. So project tree is kind of a standard quick save. You hit F5, it snaps a snapshot. If you hit F4, it snaps a snapshot with a name. You can type in a name for it. I can move forward. Actually, let me keep the tree up. Oh, no, go back. How do I go back? Up arrow on here? Yeah, okay. So you can branch off of project trees, and they're all delta based. So that means, translation, I'm going to translate, that means that this snapshot here only contains the differences from the base. So they're efficient on disk. So it does keep it as a separate file. You'll now notice there's a .hfpt. So HFPs is my Hueforge project files. HFPT is the tree. Made the choice to save it separately just to avoid making the HFPs that we pass around huge. But if you want to pass the project history with it, you can. It always looks for the HFPT in the folder right next to the file. So each one of these is a delta, mostly, and this will actually support image changes too. So if you put a completely new image in and you save it, it will keep that, and you can go back to the old image and through images. So this is something that the undo tree couldn't do. If you loaded a new image in, it's like, yeah, I don't know what you did, because there was too many things it touched and too much stuff changed when that happened in Hueforge. So this lets you do that. And you could branch 30 times off the side here. You could branch, you could go down in a straight line. And also, it saves, oh, actually, that's on another slide. Let's move forward. Okay, so yeah, manual and automatic snapshotting is F5 and F4. For F5 is an unnamed snapshot, F4 is named. And if you're on a Mac or on a PC that's got like media keys at the top, you may need to hit the function button to get your F5 or F10 or the buttons to work. And then by default, changing your mesh mode will make a snapshot automatically, because it's a very common thing to want. Oh crap, I changed it, I want to go back. It will make a snapshot for you before you change the mode. So it sees you changing the mode, it'll go make the snapshot and then change the mode for you. And then autosaves also save snapshots. Autosaves go every minute. If there's a delta, it'll save. And if there's a delta, it'll take a snapshot. That won't be in your tree, because that would make your tree giant. It'll be in an autosave tree that gets pruned. So it's not every autosave, but like the last 100 or so, you get to set it. We'll get it. And then F10 lets you see the whole tree, and you can double click on a spot or click on a spot, see the differences, move through it however you want, and you can search on named items. And then F7 or F8 will let you move up, and F7's backwards one, F8's forward one down the tree. If you're on the current branch you're on, it'll just go up. It won't, if you get a branch, it'll just go down whatever line it's picked, or the last one it was on. So that's snapshotting in general. Let me talk about a little bit more on it. And there's a set of settings for snapshotting. So yeah, on Windows and Linux, this is in File Settings. On Mac, it's in Hueforge Preferences, because it moves settings there. You can limit the number of autosave snapshots. And then the snapshot checkpoint interval, at some point, applying a bunch of deltas to a base becomes expensive and time-consuming. So in this case, it's saying every 50 snapshots down a line, it will save a full project. So that from there on, it's just building from that spot. So that's just to help with rebuild time. And then you can turn on and off auto snapshot on mesh mode changes. So this should make it much easier to try a whole bunch of different things in a project, keep your history, see what you've done, where you come from, where you're going. And like, oh, I like this mode, but let me try it in this mode. But I don't really want to make a new project, and I don't want to risk saving over it. And every time you save your project, it'll save the tree as well. And I think that's all I have before questions. So then we can talk about questions, and I can demo things if that's desired as well. But my translator probably should translate anything that people have confused on. Yes?
Maybe curious just because I saw a tree. Is there any capacity to merge projects or snapshots later on down the tree? Like specific sets of settings that you want?
No, I don't have that in there. I see where you're coming from that, but I think it would be really hard to communicate what the final result would be of that merge. And so I think generally it would just be like, just go to one of the snapshots. And I will say there is one minor issue I haven't been able to quite fix in snapshots. Sometimes when you click on one to load it, it'll like half load, and the colors won't all be there, and it'll look weird. Just double click on it again, it'll do it. Like, I don't know why, sometimes it doesn't, but just double clicking on it again will load it fully. Yeah, I think the issue is just communicating what that difference is and how it's going to affect the final product. Anyone else questions for me or Danny? Yeah. So they have thumbnails. So you can see the thumbnails, so you can see like the overall changes, but like if you're looking for fine grain changes, there's not currently a way to be like, I want to compare this snapshot to this snapshot in a big window. That's not a bad idea. But that there isn't a current way to do that, no. Yeah?
Can you briefly touch on mesh modes?
Mesh modes. Okay, so there are the mesh modes. So they used to be called luminance modes or luminance, and they were the ways that Hueforge views the image to make a mesh, to make the model. And so they were renamed in 9.2, I think, to mesh modes because it's a more accurate description of what they do. And so there are 6. So there's standard, which is just standard luminance model. So it's dark to light, and it just uses the standard luminance weightings, which are a photographic and visual perception term for the color channels in an RGB image, and it makes them, grayscale. And so Hueforge just sees it all as a black and white image. There is combo, which is a weighted average of standard and max channel. And I'll talk about max channel in a second, but combo defaults to 100%, and 100% is 100% standard. And 0 is 0% standard and is exactly max channel. So the default standard or combo is going to be the same thing for the default settings. If you start changing that slider, it's going to be different, but okay. So those are all just luminance. Max channel is a simplified luminance. Instead of saying, I care about what the standard luminance model says, it's saying, I care which color channel is the highest, and just give me the luminance value based on the highest color channel. And I did this because there was a lot of images early on where you might have limb lighting of like a red glow around someone, and you wanted that to be really bright, but it was only red, and so it was never very bright. And so I was able to say, well, if it's super red, then make it really bright. And so that was what max. And so for fire, often it was really good to be able to blend the fire and get the amount of red and white and yellow and stuff you wanted in your fire by changing that slider. Scaled max channel is the 4th mode. It tries to smooth that out a little bit and like count how many channels there are that are near max and all that kind of stuff. But really, we almost never use it, and I leave it there for legacy purposes. There are a few projects that are just made way better with scaled max channel. I can't tell you ahead of time if they are, and I've used it like twice. So that one's not one I'd work with. Color pop, one we discussed. Color aware, which was kind of the earlier version of color match, and more limited. So color aware, instead of breaking up by color and not color, it broke it up to which color channel was the highest. So is the red channel the highest? Then it goes in the red bin. Is the blue channel the highest? It goes in the blue bin. Is the green channel the highest? It goes in the green bin. And then that splits it up into 3 different Hueforges stacked on top of each other. And you had a little bit of control over the ordering of that stacking, but not actually that much control. You could only do 2 different ways. And that was kind of like how we did everything for a while. And we had some ability to color shift images to push things into one bin or the other, especially the blacks and the whites. You would say, I want all my blacks to be in the red bin. And then all of them would be in the red bin by shifting all the overall colors.
Those particular modes that he just described, the early days were really rough. We had to actually edit every image to get that control, whereas he's about to talk about color match a little bit more, I think. So, go ahead.
Yeah, the last mode is color match. And color match was trying to basically said, instead of saying, again, color aware was easier because it just picked the things that were the most blue or the things that were the most green and put them together. But color match, you can then say, well, one of the issues you run into is, do you want the yellow to be with the green, or do you want the yellow to be with the red? Or do you need the yellow to be with the green and with the red? And these were very common issues you'd run into. And so color match lets you pick that ordering. And if you know how filaments blend from practicing with standard modes, then you can say, oh, well, I know if I go from red to yellow to white to yellow to green, I'm going to get both like my red flower and my green leaves. And they're going to be nice and continuous, and you won't have any gaps between them or jumps, and you won't have the highlights conflicting. And so it gave you full control over how they stacked, but with still a caveat that sometimes it doesn't match things the way you think it should match things. And part of that is human perceptual vision. We are there's a ton of illusions for this, where they say this is the same color, and you look at it and say, no, it's not, it's a completely different color. But if you use a color picker, it's the same color on the screen. It's just because of what's around it, it looks like a different color. And so we will look at it and say, that's obviously green. And then you grab it and you're like, that's brown. But because of everything that's around it, it looks green to me. And I don't know why this green is not matching to it. And then you realize that's why the red's matching to it, because it's actually brown. So that's that's kind of one of the tricky parts of all of this. And that color is, I can get real nerdy on color. It's been, it's been kind of a lifelong thing. Did that answer your questions on mesh modes? Did way more detail than you needed, or not enough? Because I got more. Any more questions? Yes.
So do you have like a help page or somebody we can reach out to?
So when Hueforge started, obviously nobody knew how Hueforge worked except for me. And so I did some videos and tutorials and things like that, but I'm not a good content creator. And also, I'm too close to it. I know how it works exactly. And most people don't want to know how it works exactly. There's a few people, and I get to nerd out with them, but most people just want to know basically what to do. And so fortunately, people like Danny and Vic and a couple others have come around and started making tutorials for Hueforge that are way better than anything I could make and much better production quality. So I have a help menu in Hueforge that has help videos. I've restructured it in the newest version that came out this week. 2 major restructures. I got rid of anything that's on the legacy 8.1 UI is now marked as legacy UI, so you know, because the UI changed a lot for the 0.9 release. And then 2, and I brought in all the new stuff, and he's got a whole series of shorts now that cover single topics in a minute that are really helpful. And then the other thing it has is now the option to check for updated help. So more tutorials. So as they release new stuff, and I know Vic sent me a link yesterday, so I have to put it in there. I have the ability to go and push a page out that you can go check and get his new stuff linked in there as well. And you can also check a box to say check once a day for updates and just automatically update my menu. So that's in there now. And then on the website, I have, I think you got in a little late on the website, I have the About page now, which talks through what Hueforge is and does, and then also the 4 of the mesh modes, not scaled max channel or max channel specifically. And then more documentation is coming. And then you can reach out on the Discord, on the Facebook group, on Reddit, or by email, and you'll get help from me or someone in the community. But if you email, it's going to go to me.
Yeah, we also have a wiki as well. But typically, I mean, the Hueforge community is really helpful in general. So if you ask a question, somebody's going to have the answer.
So I will say there are formats of asking questions that are more helpful. So if you say, I don't like how it's coming out, can you help me? And you don't send me a picture and you don't tell me what you're doing, no, I can't help you. Or if you send a picture of a print and say, how can I make it better? And I'm like, I don't know what the source image looks like. I don't know what you don't like about it. So be somewhat descriptive. If you can give me a screenshot of Hueforge, if you can give me a screenshot, in your print, or if you're like, I'm worried about printing this because of this or that, show me your Hueforge window. Show me the slicer window if you're having problems in the slicer. And then say, this is my problem. How do I fix it? And then you're going to get help much quicker. So just and I understand you're frustrated. It's not working. You just want to be like, it's not working. How do I fix it? But we can help you a lot better if we have the information to help you. So, does that answer your question? Anything else for me or Danny? You can ask him what his life as a YouTube influencer is like. TikTok influencer, sorry. YouTube.
No sleep. That's, with a day job, no sleep.
Yes.
Ever release a mobile app?
So I have looked, not for phone, I've considered iPad. Right now, the rendering pipeline is incompatible with iPad, which is a major issue. And then the other issue is that UI differences, interface is going to be a lot of testing and iteration, and I'm one person. So I actually do have plans to rebuild the rendering infrastructure already, just in general, to be more compatible across more hardware. I made a choice because it was what I was familiar with and what I knew would work cross-platform, but it's kind of an antiquated choice these days to use OpenGL. And so it is possible, and it's a lift, but not impossible to redo that. And once I redo that, it is more possible to go to iPad.
I've been asking for that for 2 years, and he makes it more complicated as the years go on, so it keeps getting pushed back farther and farther.
It will be a repurchase on iPad, but it would only be if you had a commercial license, you wouldn't need to repurchase commercial license on the iPad. It would just be purchase the iPad app. But if there'd be the option. It would be a repurchase though, but I'm not there yet. I'm not a Mac programmer. I was a Windows or Linux programmer my entire life before this. So I'm still learning a lot on that side. Yes?
Is there, this might be a stupid question, something that's already in there, but the inventory is I either have this filament or don't have this filament. And there doesn't seem to be an option for I have 2 kilograms of this filament.
Yeah, there's no, okay, so, right, there's no like keeping of how much filament you have. And then the other issue is that people, and there's people that have had to solve this separately, which is I have 2 spools and they're different TDs. So I need to record those as separate spools. And literally the guy I know who does this just he copies it, adds a couple characters or whatever to the end of the name of the filament, and then changes the TD and saves it. But I don't have a way to, I don't have any, I'm not a filament tracker. It wouldn't be that hard to add a filament, a count of how many spools you have of it for, I guess, but you'd have to keep that up to date. I wouldn't really be able to keep that up to date. So then it's like, how much work, should you just spool man it and, like go that way? So
And
yeah.
like you mentioned with the different TDs between spools, like that's pretty common. So it would be very difficult to, like you can say that you have 4 spools of a black, or black's
Not
probably a
probably bad.
bad example. You can say you
red.
have 4 spools of like a gray, and your first gray measured at like an 8 TD, but your fourth gray measured at a 2 TD, which is something that I've actually ran into, which is a huge difference. I mean, you're talking about transparent versus an opaque filament, so it's just not, I mean, yeah, you could keep inventory in Hueforge, but it's going to be a little bit more complicated, I think, than using something else.
I will say that something we haven't touched on that I kind of forgot that's been added since our last show, and it wasn't, so the last show, Color Match wasn't out, but we were using it for some of the demos, and we were talking about it, and it came out in June. But I think it was the same time a tagging system came in for filament as well. So you can tag your filaments as well and say that, like, you can add whatever tag you want. And so one of the things that was added in this most recent version is you can favorite your filament, and they get put to a favorites list at the top of that window. So if you have a filament, if you have filaments you use all the time, you can favorite them, and then they'll be at the top of your PLA list. And if you go to PETG, they'll be at the top of your PETG list, whichever ones are your PETG favorites, or they're filtered correctly. And then they also bring in a list of the active filaments in the current project. So a lot of people had asked for that. They wanted that ability, and it made sense. So, but the tagging system, you can tag it with the material type, and then if you do render lit, which is a lit mode, you can do render lit and see the shine or things like that on there. And then you could also tag it, like grays are secretly tagged now, because when you filter filaments, there's a box on the bottom to filter your filaments and say, I want a gray. Well, the British and the Americans spell gray differently. And actually, I don't even think we know which one we use. So every gray filament, G-R-E-Y, G-R-E-Y is tagged secretly and hidden with G-R-A-Y, and G-R-A-Y is tagged secretly and hidden with G-R-E-Y, so that they get filtered properly. So things like that are in there that you can't see. But you can tag silks, you can tag, this one's no good for this, or I'm almost out, or like low quality, or 2 if you wanted to, and you could do that. That wouldn't be really the way to do it, but you can tag them with things that are useful to you. Like I use this for skin, like skin tone. You could have a skin tag that you just get all your skin filaments show up.
Without the kilogram, I'm maintaining 2 inventory libraries. One in Hueforge and then one that has the extra. It's fine, it's just if there was
I mean, it wouldn't be hard to add a quantity that you would have to increment and decrement. And then you're saying if you decremented it to 0, it should go unowned. That's not impossible.
I'm sure there's a form to fill out for a feature request. I figured I was here, so.
Yeah, no. That's not super difficult to do. In fact, owned could basically just be +1 instead of checkbox. That would change the whole filament library for everybody, but we could do that. For you, okay? Any more questions? I think we're just about out. I think we're basically out of time. So any last question? I want to thank you all for coming out and listening to me ramble and listening to Danny translate. Thank you very much.